Let's talk about the effect that hallucinogens have on the user. They get their name from the word hallucinate. We kind of already figured that out. It means to have visions. So again, everyone's experience with these things is going to be a little bit different. It's sometimes tough to base the symptoms of somebody or what they're experiencing on any specific drug because it's going to be so different from person to person. We can see some consistencies, but at the same time, you and I might take a drug and have very, very different experiences. And for a doctor or police officer or whoever to try and figure out what drug we are taking becomes very, very difficult. Hallucinogens affect how a user perceives the passage of time, sees color, senses motion, or hears sound. If you ever seen TV shows, cartoons, movies where they kind of wave their hand in front of their eyes, and there's the fingers kind of trail because there's kind of a blurriness to it. You see that with these kind of drugs. The user can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is not, so they kind of can live in this altered world, altered perception of time and just reality. Sometimes time goes really fast, sometimes time goes really slow. You don't realize how much time has gone by. And this can lead to strange or risky behavior. You can imagine just driving a car, having some of the things happen that I'm describing here. And LSD and PCP are examples of hallucinogens. They're the ones that we're going to hear about mostly in the media, on movies, and in TV shows. So let's start with LSD. LSD stands for lysergic acid diethylamide. You don't need to know that, but we do hear of LSD. LSD is a drug made of lysergic acid. It's one of the strongest and most widely abused hallucinogens. It doesn't take very much. A tiny amount produces a very powerful effect. And I'll describe the pictures you see here in a minute. The psychological effects are often very difficult to predict. You don't always know, again, how one person is going to react to another one. You ever hear of an acid trip before? Some people are going to have more mild reactions. Some people are going to have much more severe where they really struggle with it and really have some crazy visions and experiences that might be too much for them psychologically to handle. And a user may experience hallucinations and may not know who or where or what they are. It's just going to cause so much confusion for them. It's going to be difficult to understand. LSD is basically a liquid. All right. What happens is you can see here on this person's tongue, and over here we have what are called blotter papers. Kind of similar to like a postage stamp, but thinner. Almost kind of like the breath mint strips that you can put in your mouth and dissolve. These don't necessarily dissolve. I'm sure they break down just like paper would. But you take an eyedropper of a liquid of LSD, and you basically put a drop on each one of these little pieces of paper. And then you rip one off and you put it on your tongue, under your tongue, and you slowly dissolve the LSD. It can also be put on little tablets, which could be considered pills. These are probably some sort of a sugar pill. Also can be put on a sugar cube, and then you suck on the sugar cube and slowly absorb and dissolve the sugar and LSD in your mouth. Again, in Forrest Gump, there's a scene where Jenny is at a bonfire with some of her hippie friends, and she takes a sugar cube, puts it in her mouth, and kind of starts grooving to the music, and more than likely that was LSD. The other main hallucinogen is PCP. This stands for phencyclidine. Effects are very similar to those of LSD, but not a true hallucinogen in its chemical makeup. It can be very addictive and cause violent and unpredictable behavior, and PCP users are a threat to themselves or others. Quick story here. Some of you, if you ever heard of the LA riots or even the name Rodney King, and then in the year 1990, there was an African-American man named Rodney King, and he was driving around with some friends in Los Angeles at night, and looked as though, based on his driving, he was either driving erratically or too fast or something, that the police officers figured he was, on something, whether it was alcohol or drugs or whatever. So they pull him over and they start talking to him, and he's pretty belligerent and violent, and he's this big dude. He's like 6'5", muscular, strong, combative, being aggressive, whatever. They pull him out of the car. He doesn't cooperate. He's obviously under the influence of something. And one of the other side effects of PCP is it causes your pain receptors to kind of be dulled or numbed, so you don't really feel pain. So you can kind of get yourself beat up and not really feel it. So these officers jumped to the conclusion that he was on PCP and started beating the tar out of him. Just started beating him up. I think there were 4 officers. And fortunately for Rodney King, somebody nearby, I can't remember if it was somebody who saw this across the street or if it was a video from a surveillance camera, it was filmed. And it was basically 4 white officers beating up a black African American man in Los Angeles. Well, the media caught wind of this and it was all over the news. And before you know it, the whole black community in Los Angeles is up in an uproar, uprising, rioting in the streets against basically the abuse of force from these white police officers. Which, what the officers did was out of line. They didn't need to do that. They could have arrested him and try to take him down under more appropriate means. But so it ends up the officers end up, I think, going to trial. I think a couple of them got in trouble for what they did. And Rodney King kind of coined the phrase, "Why can't we all just get along?" And it was a pretty big deal in 1990. It's one of the reasons why officers carry tasers now too, is because if somebody's too big to take down or they're out of control, you can quick tase them, put some cuffs on them, and put them in the back of a police car. But it turned out he wasn't on PCP. I guess he was just drunk on alcohol. But I believe it was documented that they thought he was on PCP. Moving on to inhalants. Inhalants are, again, a big problem. There's something that can be found at inside your house, at a neighbor's house, can be easily purchased from a local hardware store, Walmart, Target, you name it. Even Cub have some of these things, grocery stores. We're talking about an inhalant is any substance whose fumes are sniffed or inhaled to produce mind-altering sensations. All right. More often than not, one of the sensations that comes along with this is a very lightheaded feeling. All right. So, if you ever heard of the choking game where somebody puts their arm around somebody's neck, cuts off the blood supply to their brain, and all of a sudden releases, and that blood rushes to the head, some people kind of like that feeling. By the way, don't do it. Very dangerous. Students and teenagers have died from it because obviously cutting off oxygen supply and blood supply to the brain can be very, very dangerous. Again, these can be found readily around the house. Toxic inhalants are not meant to be put in the human body. They're meant to used as spray paint, to use as cleaners, different things around the house. Freon in air conditioning units. There have been stories of teenage kids who will go huff or sniff the Freon in their air conditioner and literally die on the spot because it's so dangerous and powerful to the brain. Hundreds die each year from sniffing and huffing inhalants. Bad stuff. So what are some damage that these things do? Abusing inhalants can damage the protective coating that surrounds brain cells called myelin. So basically your brain and nerve cells have this protective coating around it. It's called myelin. And the more we sniff these chemicals that are found in inhalants, the slowly we can start to break down that protective coating. And you can imagine what the damage that could do to the cell of your nerves and spinal cord. Now, if I were to damage a muscle on my arm, my arm heals and a lot of that muscle tissue can grow back. In my brain, those cells don't grow back, so we're damaging, permanently cells that we need on a day-to-day basis for the rest of our lives. If damaged, these nerve cells may not be able to send messages to other parts of the body. They can affect the person's ability to walk, talk, and think, just everyday type of activities and skills. Can cause instant death, and can also cause people to die from choking, suffocation, or heart attack. Big strain on the heart, and certainly if we are depriving the lungs and the body of oxygen, and certainly the brain, we know that can be incredibly damaging and bad news. Some warning signs of inhalants. I like showing this slide. I like showing this picture down here. This guy, he has gold paint around his mouth and nose. Huffing is just another word for sniffing or using inhalants. And one way that a lot of teenagers and people in general will huff is they take a chemical such as spray paint, and gold and silver are some of the favorites because it's a heavier paint, therefore it needs more aerosol chemicals in the can to eject it from the can, and that's what people get high off of. That's what they inhale. So this guy is a great example of someone who would take like a brown paper bag used for your paper bag lunch, and you take a can of spray paint, you spray a bunch of spray in the bottom of the bag, but in the bag, just the rest of the air, a bunch of those chemicals and aerosols still hang about in the bag. They don't stick to the bag because that's where the paint goes. And you quickly put it up to your mouth and nose, and you breathe in that void of air and all that aerosol chemicals, and that's how you get high. So inevitably, you're going to get some on your face and mouth and whatnot, and probably even breathe some in. So you can imagine how dangerous that would be. Sherman County Drug Task Force team once told me that they said, one of their job is to look for clues on who is doing drugs and things like that. He goes, yeah, this is a clue. All right. So pretty telltale sign what's going on. We're also going to see eyes that are runny or red. We're going to see sores or spots near the mouth, breath that smells strange or like chemicals, and someone who might hold a marker or pen near their nose. So someone who is basically sniffing or huffing a pen to get those kind of effects. Here's a funny little video from the movie Airplane. This kind of illustrates, this guy's name is Lloyd Bridges. He died a few years ago, but a pretty funny actor. In the movie, he kind of shows a couple different habits that he has. If you ever seen the movie, it's pretty funny, but they're going to show him stop smoking, stop using amphetamines, I believe alcohol, and also sniffing glue. So it's meant to be silly. But I think it's pretty funny, but you can kind of check it out for yourself here.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking. It's like I picked the wrong week to quit drinking. Can't take much more of this. It's like I picked the wrong week to quit amphetamines. It's like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
If you've never seen the movie, it's basically silly and dumb the whole time. It's not a very serious movie, so I don't want you to think that those are just kind of serious clips. It proves that when somebody's in a stressful situation, they may turn to those things, and certainly just using humor as a way to explain or to show what some people actually really do. All right, in chapter 14, lesson 4, we're going to talk about hallucinogens and inhalants, two pretty important categories of drugs. Hallucinogens, again, are going to be different drugs that cause people to hallucinate, but see different things based on their own experiences, based on the drug they're taking, the strength of it, and whatnot. Inhalants are an incredibly dangerous one, too, just because these are the things that are going to be around our houses, things we have available to us, things that teenagers can go get for a couple bucks at a hardware store. And many people won't think otherwise. You're not. If you go buy a can of spray paint and or some glue or something, no one's going to think that you're a drug user or dealer at first glance. Especially if you're kind of new to it. There's certainly telltale signs for somebody who might be a drug user or dealer down the road, but not just your average teenager. So let's talk about hallucinogens. We're talking about drugs that distort moods, thoughts, and senses. One of our vocab words here. MDMA or ecstasy, some other drugs, even marijuana will have some hallucinogenic effects. Even meth, depending on how much you take and how long you've been taking it, can cause some of those different thoughts or moods in the user that would be considered hallucinations. Again, it's not that you're going to necessarily see Abraham Lincoln standing in the room with you, but you're going to see colors and sounds, and you're going to see things out of the corner of your eyes. It's going to kind of create some anxiety and panic in the user, potentially, and they can start to believe what they hear or see, and you can sometimes hear voices in their head. Some of these are made of natural substances that you find in plants, such as cactuses or mushrooms, but many of them can be manufactured, meaning they're made in a lab. They're made by chemists, drug dealers, drug users, you name it. So there's a wide variety of hallucinogens that are out there.